Hi guys, my name is Tammy. Welcome to my channel. And if you'd like to learn how to paint these soft and billowy, beautiful orchids, then stay tuned. Let's talk about supplies. Okay, so I have my paper taped down in my watercolor sketchbook. I have my paints, I have my water, and the brushes that I've selected to use today are, first of all, my 1/2-inch dagger brush, but you don't have to use a dagger. If you don't have one, you can use a round brush. This is a number 8 round, nice pointed tip. And I like to use a liner for the details, or you can use one of these number 1, number 2 round. Just use whatever you have. And of course, I have a rag here for dabbing the brush sometimes if it gets too wet. So of course, we're going to need a pencil for sketching and an eraser if you want to erase some of those lines. This is kind of what we're going for here, a little sample I did. Let's get started. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and sketch out with a really light pencil hold this orchid, just kind of copying at least what I did before. And we're going to make this lovely vine. I don't even know what this part is called that the flowers all grow on. We'll just say it's kind of a vine. It's kind of like a tree. And then we're going to create this little box here for the planter where the orchid is in. Now it's interesting because these are not actually set in dirt, at least for the most part. What they do best in is in just like rocks and little pieces that they can kind of wrap their roots around, pieces of rocks, or even I've seen some type of bark. And so let's go ahead and make this square here, a little cube. It can be hard to make those shapes, so just kind of play around with the lines until you get it right. And I have to say, when I say get it right, I mean how you like it. We're not going for perfection. In fact, look at this. I think this box is a little too small. Just going to make it a little bit wider, and that way I feel like it fits just a little bit better. Okay, so now we're going to start sketching some of the leaves that come off of here. And they're very roundy leaves. I'm going to do, I think, 6, about 3 on each side. So just adding them kind of randomly. I don't want them to be matchy-matchy. Unfortunately, when you have pairs, like I have 3 sets of pairs, your eye is going to try to match them up. So maybe make some longer, some shorter, some wonkier. They have these little viney things that come out as well. I should probably study my orchid parts. I could be better at explaining what I'm doing. But just little vines that are coming off of there. Just make them however you'd like them to be. And let's do the flowers now. We're going to have 3 petals, and the biggest bloom will be on the bottom here. We're going to keep going up 3 petals. And as we go upwards towards the tip of the plant, we're going to get smaller and smaller blooms. And we might even have just 2 petals towards the end as well, and then some buds. So just sketching it out is really nice. It helps you to know where things will go and helps you achieve the composition that you'd like to. Of course, if you want to be living crazy and wild and free, don't even sketch it out and see what happens. It could be a nice exercise and practice. So this is a little light peachy color that I have on this palette. And if you don't have that, just take some pink and some yellow, mix that together and create a nice little peach color. Some pink and yellow will give you that look. All right, just erasing a little bit of those lines. I personally don't mind lines, but I know some people do, and so you can just lighten them up so you can still see them, but they're not going to show through your paint, because once that paint is down, super hard to erase. All right, as you see, I'm holding my brush really loosely. We're just following that basic sketch, guys, that we put down. And I'm going to leave some white space too, because I want to add in, let's see, we'll make some more pink on that. A little bit pinkier than that peach. I have 2 light colors on my palette and they're really pretty. So I'm just kind of dipping in, adding in some paint. This is a pretty watery mix. Let's add in some fuchsia in the middle. While this is wet, this is called a wet on wet technique, and it's going to spread that paint in the peach paint, making a really nice bloom or a really nice mixture. So this part is so easy, just adding in, see how loose I'm holding, adding in your blooms. And with that white space, you could always fill it in with other color or just leave it like reflections of light on your composition, on your blooms. Let's grab some more of that bright pink color and do the rest of the centers of these flowers. I really love how you get a nice blending when you're adding wet paint into wet paint. and you're going to get that soft line that you wouldn't get if you were waiting until everything is dry before adding your darker paint over the top of dry paint. Okay, we're mixing together a little bit of green. The green in this palette is very light, yellowy, so I want to add in some turquoise just to change the hue of that a little bit. If it's too bright, in nature, greens are pretty mellow for what we're seeing on our palette. So, and I'm adding some blue, just making it a little bit more bluish greens. Then brown is gonna darken it up, make it a little bit more realistic, like naturey green. But you can add whatever green that you want on your palette. So holding the brush lightly, we're gonna start adding in our orchid leaves. And the great thing about having a sketch already done is it's just kind of that paint by number, or is that what I'm trying to say? Or just like coloring in a coloring book, which is actually what I did when I was growing up. I didn't do really much sketching or painting or drawing. We had coloring books and that's what we did. I just think that's kind of interesting, kind of funny. I don't know. I don't know if that was what people were doing back then, but that's just what our art consisted of. It's a little different these days. Okay, so we've got our stem. I might change that to a brown later. We'll see. Little wonky, lovely little vines. I don't know what else to call them. And I'm using the pointed side of my dagger. This is why I love the dagger so much. If you can invest in one, which some of them can be very, very affordable, it's well worth it because you can make large marks and then really thin marks with that pointed part of your brush. Just connecting all these blooms together on this stem. I hope you're having such a fun time. I'm really enjoying this composition. It's just really pretty and springy and a nice change from all the wintry, Christmassy stuff we've been doing. I'm darkening up this stem with some brown here. I think that will look best. And I think that I'll probably keep the little vines green. I like that. I like the look of that. Okay, now I'm grabbing some blue. Let's start to paint in that planter box, or whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to make it a lot darker on this right side. We're going to imagine that the light is coming from the left. And so on the left side, you're going to have more of a lighter color. And then on the right, that part of this planter is going to be more in shadow. And so we'll keep that a darker blue. And then let's put some water on our brush and just start spreading out the paint on the front of this planter box. Now, guys, I want you to be aware of kind of what your body is doing right now. Are you experiencing any muscle tension and anxiety in your head about your painting? I always want to encourage you guys to relax and enjoy what you're doing. If you're not enjoying it, maybe step away and reevaluate what's going on. Yeah, I just wanted to show you guys briefly that's kind of the direction we're going in terms of a background. And let's start with a little bit of a tan color at the top, and then we'll do more of that medium green color at the bottom and kind of work with some light and shadow as well. So we are just adding really light watery paint and then using water to spread that paint around. And it's okay if things bleed together. If your blooms start to bleed, we can always go back when it's dry and redefine some of those shapes with some more paint, darker saturated paint. So don't even worry about it, just put the paint down. And so I highly encourage you guys to make this a daily practice if you can of painting something, as long as it's not overwhelming to you. Also, using a lot of water here, spreading this out, is going to create a really nice texture, maybe even some blooms where the water and the new paint on top of the water is sort of melding and pushing around together, which creates these little cauliflower shapes, which I think the texture will be really pretty in a painting like this. I can already see some at the top starting to form. So yes, being a relaxation process, painting is such a beautiful thing, but it can bring a lot of stress and self-doubt and even fear, which when you think about it, well, why would you be afraid of painting? But it's just something that creeps in. We get worried that we're going to paint something ugly or disappointing, we're going to waste supplies, or that we're just not going to be good enough. And so I encourage you and invite you to get out of that mindset and just allow your body to relax. And the story in your head should be, this is fun. This is practice. Every time I try this, it doesn't matter how it turns out. The point is that I'm getting better. And guys, I have to practice this myself because I find myself so often comparing my art to other artists and to other people out there that are sharing what they're creating. And it really sucks the joy out of my time. And so if you are experiencing this, I encourage yourself to kind of picture the stop sign in your head. Stop. Okay, reevaluate. What's the story in your head? Okay, let's take a little brief from the psychology talk. We're darkening up our lovely orchids. You can wait until this is dry, and then you'll experience less bleeding of color into the background that we just put. But I really like that soft edged look where everything is just kind of blending into each other. And so we're just adding in more saturated paint. There's a lot less water for the amount of pigment that I've put in my mixing well there. And so just dab that in, and that's looking good. It's looking more redefined, and we'll add in a little bit more of that darker pink too. So as you're looking at your painting right now and you're dabbing in the centers of those orchids, start thinking about what is one thing that you love about your painting so far. And if all you can think of is something about the color, then great. That is something that you can think of. We're going to darken up our little vines and kind of stemmy parts and our leaves as well. And so maybe there's two things you can think of that you're enjoying about your painting right now, and just kind of reflect on that. What is it that you like? And if you guys are painting this or going to paint this, let me know in the comments what you think about this composition. Did it work for you? Was it frustrating to try to paint it? I'm really curious about your experience here, so definitely feel free to start the conversation on that in the comments, and I appreciate all of your feedback. Okay, this is starting to come together nicely, and we are going to darken up that stem with a little bit more brown. And like I said before, a lot of those sharp edges have been blotted away because we mixed together all that watery paint in the background. And so we're just redefining things, making them stand out more. And when you add a background like that over paint that's already been dry, or maybe it's a little bit wet still, you're going to have kind of some surprises about what's going on. I think I'm going to make these all brown here. With a little bit of green there underneath, and that's going to show through. And you don't know exactly how the paint will react. Let's add a little bit more sticks or vines here just to make it pretty. And so, it's kind of a big surprise. And with watercolor, it's interesting because you can learn to control some parts of it, but other parts can be kind of challenging. And sometimes they can even surprise you. So just be prepared for that, and knowing that there's some beauty in that as well. With watercolor, I'd say it is one of the most challenging mediums out there. Now, I did learn to paint on watercolor before I knew that it was more challenging. So I was grateful once I found that out that I had been working on it for a bit, so that I wasn't feeling overwhelmed with. Because if you go into a medium thinking that it's going to be really, really, really challenging and hard, I don't know, it's not necessarily the best thing for your encouragement and in wanting to keep up with something new. So if you're finding this to be challenging, don't worry. It is that way for everyone, and you are not alone. And practice does help the challenging get better. I really like how adding brown here really makes that depth show through in the planter box. Okay, I'm sorry this is off camera and you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm mixing together a nice blue shade that we can use for a shadow here on the right side of our orchid plant. Remember I said that this part is more in shadow, and so we just want to show that. Let's add a little green. Just darken that up a little bit. And that'll just make things pop and be a little bit more realistic. As you can see on the right side, we have a little bit darker green there just to represent that space is a little bit more in that shadow. Let's add in here a little bit more in our background if you feel like you want to touch up some of that peachy paint, which it's looking more tan more than anything. A little bit of peachy paint, some tan color. And I love how it looks like the light is shining down over the blooms here. All right, just a little bit more here, and I think we'll be good to go. I want to darken up a little bit of the orchids real quick. So I'm going to take a little bit more pink on my brush here, and just a few, I guess this is that peachy color, just a little more, just dipped right into the palette so we get that saturated, lovely color here and towards the tips, and that is it. my favorite part, we get to take off the tape. Guys, I'm so glad that you're able to paint this with me today. Again, let me know in the comments what you thought about it. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them best I can. I do offer Patreon classes if you guys are interested in learning to paint with me more in depth. It's a great way to support also what I do. If you like these tutorials that I put out here, helps me continue to do these things. But the best thing for you is that you guys can get up to 5 full-length tutorials that are exclusive to Patreon every month, depending on the tier that you sign up for. And we even do some gouache, and the tiers are as low as $3 a month. So I also have an Etsy shop. All these things are linked in the description of this video. But most of all, I'm so glad that you were here to paint with me today. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.